Good day. My name is John Lulu. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Small Business Institute, and welcome to a series of our podcast with thought leaders in the run-up to the G20 and the B20 meetings towards the end of the year. Today, I'm pleased to welcome onto the show the CEO of the Business Unity South Africa, Mr. Khulekani Mathe. Before we start the conversation, let me introduce him. He joined BUSA in February 2023 from the Banking Association of South Africa. In this role, his responsibilities included driving transformation in the banking industry, fostering small business development, and promoting financial education. Khulekani is an experienced professional in policy development and has held various roles in the public service. He has served in the presidency, the National Planning Commission Secretariat, and the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation. While working in the National Planning Commission Secretariat, he played a key role in the development of the National Development Plan and served as the head of the Secretariat. Earlier in his career, Khulekani dedicated 15 years of his life to the education sector, focusing on adult education. During this time, he led the Thembaletu Community Education Center, which received national and international recognition for its exceptional work, winning 2 national awards and 1 international award. In 2007, he was appointed chairman of the Ministerial Committee responsible for reviewing adult education policy in South Africa. He also played a role in the establishment and governance of the Education, Training and Development Center when it was established. Khulekani is a certified director of companies and a member of the Institute of Directors of South Africa. He holds a Master's of Science degree in Development Finance and a Master of Education degree specializing in adult education. Additionally, he is a fellow of the Africa Leadership Initiative, ALI, which is part of the Aspen Global Leadership Network, and alumnus of the Ford Foundation International Fellowship Program, and serves on the board of directors of IBUSASA Student Financial Aid Program Foundation, and was recently appointed onto the boards of the Human Resource Development Council and the National Education Collaboration Trust. Beyond his professional achievements, Khulekani is an avid long-distance athlete and has completed the Comrades Marathon 10 times. Yes, 10 times. I'm really delighted to have Khulekani today as our guest in the first of our series this year. Khulekani, welcome, and thank you so much for making the time, especially ahead of such a momentous occasion today. We're here to discuss the B20. But before we start, let's talk about your role in BUSA and your priorities for this year. Clearly, before we segue into the conversation about B20. And welcome again, and thanks for making the time for us, Khulekani. What are the priorities this year?
Thanks, John. I'm very delighted to have cracked an invite to your podcast, and so also for this introduction. I must just tell you, John, before we go too far, that of all the things you've said, I consider my biggest achievement running the Comrades Marathon 10 times, because the thing is bloody hard, so I consider that one of my greatest achievements. But yeah, coming back to your question, John, so Business Unity South Africa, as you know, is there's Apex Business Organization, a federation of various industry and sector associations in South Africa. We singularly focus on promoting an environment that is, enabling environment for business to thrive. So we engage with government and various stakeholders, parliament, etc., to really advocate for an enabling environment for business so that businesses can grow and thrive. Because when businesses grow, society benefits. Businesses create jobs, businesses reinvest, and businesses also pay taxes that fund a whole lot of government services, social services, etc. And so one of our major priorities, given that we have really not seen good levels of growth in this economy for so many years, is to promote economic growth, work with other stakeholders to promote economic growth. As you know, we have a partnership with government to address some of the challenges that are holding our economy back. And so we're putting every effort in making sure that the delivery of the actions agreed to in that partnership is achieved, because we believe those will contribute significantly to growing the South African economy. So in a nutshell, we focus on the promotion of growth and the creation of an environment for business to succeed and thrive.
Thanks, Khulekani. Just before we start talking about the core of the issue that we wanted to discuss today, can you give us some highlights on the collaboration between business and government, and also make a comment on the view that this amounts to an extra tax for business? Because some of these services, crime and corruption, tackling the energy crisis, unemployment crisis, the water crisis, are really in the purview and province of government. We pay taxes as South Africans, corporates and individuals. Why should business be doing this as well? And what are the highlights of this collaboration? Thank you.
Thanks, John. As it happens, today is a day after we had a meeting with the business and with the government president and his members of his cabinet. Really one of the progress meetings where we meet with the president periodically to review how things are going. So as you know, one of the issues that really gave impetus to this partnership was the need to address the energy crisis that gripped the country. I mean, it's been with us for many, many years, but around 2002 and 2003 kind of reached unacceptable levels where, there would be load shedding twice in a day, which means that companies could really only have electricity to power their operation for very, very limited time. And of course, that affected every aspect of society, not just businesses. It affected hospitals, it affected everything. So it was clear that unless something is done, we were really heading for a disaster, right? It was a crisis of massive proportions, and there's just no other way of describing it. So that was one of those things that really gave rise to this partnership. And of course, to that was added transport and logistics, and I will say something about that very shortly. And of course, the crime and corruption crisis that we lived through in South Africa was another. And finally, the fourth area is employment, and in particular, youth employment. So going back to the energy or electricity crisis, thanks to this partnership, we have now been able to reduce load shedding. In fact, by many accounts, we are close to being out of load shedding completely. Doesn't mean that we are out of the woods, because there are other challenges, such as the infrastructure, distribution infrastructure of municipalities, which fails from time to time, leading to different parts of the cities and villages being without electricity. So that remains something that needs to be addressed. Second one, of course, is that our transmission infrastructure needs to be developed and expanded, because yes, we have developed renewable energy, but it is in areas where the transmission network doesn't reach, for instance. So there is a need to expand it. So although load shedding has been largely overcome, but there are other challenges in the energy space which still need our attention. So but the partnership is focusing on that and looking at how to find lasting solutions to that. On the transport and logistics, again, we know that we are an economy that is, that has a very strange structure where most of the production happens inland, in the Gauteng area mostly. And so in order for us to export our product, we have to then transport this product over 600, 700, in some instances, 800 kilometers to the port. And for that, you need an excellent transport, rail, and everything else network to do that. It has been failing, and hence the inclusion of that as one of the areas in our partnership. There again, we've seen some improvements from where we were when we started. When we started, Transnet was only able to move 149 million tons of which is volumes. And since the partnership started, it moved to 152 million, and more recently, in the recently concluded financial year, Transnet was able to move 161 million tons. Again, there is improvement. It's not at the level we want, but there is some improvement. And again, I think it's thanks to the partnership that we're there. The crime and corruption, I think we're nowhere near really addressing the problem, because it is multifaceted, but it is also one of those things where, as business, there's not much we can do, because a lot of it has to be done by the relevant government authorities. But to the extent that we can provide support, we have. One of the things we did earlier was that, as you know, there was a lot of vandalism of economic infrastructure, the stealing of cables leading to trains not able to move, the sabotage at ESCOM power stations, etc. And so again, working with government, we provided security there to address that problem. And I think that's largely addressed. We're now looking at other areas, but as I've said, it's one of those areas where the role of business is limited, and government has to play a bigger role in this, but we're working with government. Unemployment, again, I mean, that's one of the biggest challenges, but we now have an agreed program with government. We must make the point, John, that unemployment is a product of growth. So we need to grow the economy so that there are opportunities for employment. But what we're looking at here are areas and sectors that show opportunities for growth, even in a slow economic growth environment, right? So things like tourism, where if we really get tourists into the country, we know that for every 10 to 12 tourists, there's one job that's created, the other being global business services, etc. So there's a program there, and we're seeing some progress, but it is early days. Your question about why should business do all of this, I would agree with you, by the way, that we all pay taxes so that the government can perform these functions in an economy. We just found ourselves in a situation where it was clear that government alone would not be able to address these problems, and we needed to come to the party as must all South Africans. And hopefully we will reach a point again where things have stabilized and the government can do its job, because it is unsustainable for business to continue getting involved, at least at the level of intensity that we have been involved. But the idea of a partnership itself, I think, is one that should endure, because there are benefits to parties working together, exchanging, comparing notes, etc., etc.
Yeah, I suppose it's a case of the house is on fire. You can't wait for the owner of the house to put it out. If you've got a bucket of water, you're a neighbor, you put out the fire. I'm glad that you've sort of emphasized the fact that this is a partnership and it's not supposed to be a permanent feature. Otherwise, it makes the cost of doing business very expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Khulekani, thank you so much for that. We now are at a stage where we have to discuss a very important calendar event in our country. If you go around the streets of Gauteng, the highways of Gauteng, you see a sign, big billboards by the Gauteng government welcoming delegates to the G20 meeting. So governments of the G20 will be meeting in our country towards the end of the year. And businesses, the private sector, both public and the private businesses will be hosting the B20. Could you please talk to us about the B20 and how it links in with the G20 and the role that BUSA will be playing? And I should congratulate you and express confidence in your leadership of the B20 as our CEO at Business Unity South Africa.
Thanks, John. So the B20 is really a business engagement forum of the G20. In other words, it is a platform where businesses and business organizations in the G20 countries come together to discuss matters of common interest, looking into both in the present and into the future of what we think are the policies that would be required to support businesses into the future. Out of those interactions that happen in the B20, we come up with a document which documents the recommendations we want to make to the governments of the G20 countries about what we think should be given attention in the policies that they make from a business point of view. So there's the B20. There are other platforms similar to us that are looking at various other issues. For instance, there's the Urban 20, which is a similar structure, but for cities looking at issues of urbanization. There is a L20, labor, in other words, labor 20, where unions in the various G20 countries also meet and discuss matters of common interest. So that's really what the B20 is for business. As things stand, starting early this year, we launched our B20 in Cape Town in February this year. Yeah. Very excellent event, well attended, and it was just beautiful through and through. Not only was it beautiful from a logistical and so on point of view, but also we had some really interesting engagements, which marked the start of our B20 year. We have task forces, so this would be groups, and call them working groups if you like, which are focusing on different policies that we will be recommending to the G20 countries at the end of the year or towards the end of the year. Just to give you an example of some of those task forces, I might not be able to remember all of them off by heart, but just to give you an example, we have a trade and investment task force, which is looking at issues of trade. Absolutely critical given what is happening in the global economy around trade. And the second one is employment, education and employment. Again, very, very topical issues. Certainly in South Africa, those two issues are important because we have high unemployment on the one hand and an education system that unfortunately has not lived up to expectations for a very long time. Then we have a task force on digital transformation, right? Yeah. We all are living through this digital transformation in one way or another. In some instances, we are very, very aware of it, and in others, we're not aware of it, right? In the sense that, there's things like AI, which does things that we were not sure could be done a few years ago, right? So this transformation is important because it is going to affect how governments deliver services, but more importantly, it's going to affect businesses. It is affecting businesses, and if businesses do not harness this and make it work for businesses, it could we could be left behind. And so, really thinking through what this digital transformation means for our economies is absolutely critical. Then we've got sustainable agriculture, food systems and agriculture. Again, these are important topics that have to be addressed. Industrial transformation is another. You know, John, so there's 8 of them altogether. Teams are already working, they've met 2 to 3 times. The people who are participating in these task forces or working groups, just for simplicity, come from all G20 countries and South Africa. Obviously, as the hosts, we have the more people in those task forces, between 30 and 40% of people in those task forces are South Africa. The membership of the task force is, again, wide-ranging from about 100 to, in some instances, 200, more than 200 people participating there. A great deal of interest. You know, when we took over from Brazil, they told us that the number of people in these task forces, when they had the presidency, were up to 150. So the interest has just increased when it comes to South Africa, and we are very happy about that. We think this is an excellent opportunity in this year, very tumultuous in many ways, that we've been given as a country to be to play this role, this leadership role in the global economy, where our government can interact with other governments and really lead and set the agenda for what is important for those for the G20 countries. As business, and as BUSA in particular, as the host organization, working with our colleagues in BLSA and with the participation of many other organizations and businesses, we also see this as an opportunity. I mean, at the very, very basic level, we are going to and are already having people coming into South Africa to attend different working groups of the government meetings, etc. So there's a lot of traffic coming into the country. And towards the end of the year, when we kind of move towards a close, there's going to be lots of people come through. At the basic level, we should put our best foot forward, because we have an opportunity where people are going to be coming through and just show that what a beautiful country we are, firstly, and secondly, that we are open for business. We want investment in this economy because we know what investment can do. And of course, there's a lot more, but I think at a basic level, we should really strive to at least make sure that we put forward our best foot.
Yeah, Khulekani, I'm glad that you have given more granular details about participation through the task forces. Is this a festival of big businesses? I haven't heard you mention small businesses. I haven't heard you mention township economies, village economies. Is this a festival of big businesses and governments?
Absolutely not. So, and I knew you were coming to this question. I didn't want to preempt it to take away your thunder, because if I did, you would be redundant. Might as well get fired.
Yes.
John, it's not a festival of big business. In all of these task forces that I have described, one of the things as South Africa, and it has been done before, but we wanted to make sure that we focus, and so have given a direction to the various task forces that in looking at issues of digital transformation, they need to come up with recommendations. As an example, they need to come up with recommendations that says, how does digital transformation, for instance, power and support small businesses? So that everything that we've described here is also viewed not just from a point of view of big business, but also from a point of view of small business. And so our teams have been very careful, even in the selection of people to, or not selection, but yeah, it is actually selection, because we received applications for people to participate in this, to make sure that we have a balance between those who come from smaller businesses and those who come from big business. There is, by the way, John, a grouping that has set itself up as an engagement grouping that focuses on the township economies, called the T20. We are interacting with them. They are participating in some of these task forces, but we're also interacting with them because it is absolutely critical that we do so. So definitely not a festival of big business at all.
It gives me great comfort to hear you say that. So what you've taken is an approach that says we will not have a standalone SME focus, but we'll have a cross-cutting approach. In other words, for all these work streams, task forces, there will be a small business segment to it. Am I correct to understand you are saying?
Yeah, that's right. That's correct. Because, John, we've seen that the topic of small businesses, of small, medium enterprises, has been in the B20, previous B20s, and then gets dropped and brought back in by different countries. And so we've looked at that and said, how well did that go? And so we think that if we force everybody, well, force in inverted commas, everybody to not leave the idea of small businesses to that task force or working group, but to say, we must all think about it, from whether we're discussing trade and investment, whether we're discussing employment and education, whether we're discussing industrial transformation. How does all of this affect small businesses, and how do small businesses contribute to this? So everybody is thinking about these questions rather than having it as a standalone topic.
Yeah. Khulekani, two things. I would like you to sort of touch on the specific role that BUSA, as an apex organization in our country, is playing in organizing B20, and the progress that has been made since the launch in Feb to now. And then, of course, the elephant in the room, the geopolitical tensions that's going on in the world. Has this affected the work of B20 or not? Yeah.
So firstly, I just want to tell you, John, that I've decided to sit outside for this podcast. I'm not sitting in the room, so that I do not share a room with an elephant. So where I am, there's no elephant in the room because I'm sitting outside. But I'm not trivializing what you're saying. I mean, it is an important question. I mean, it is something that is affecting and will affect the global economy as a whole. You've seen in a couple of weeks ago, was it last week already, where the IMF cut down its forecast of global growth, as well as South Africa's growth. A lot of it has to do with these global developments, the geopolitical tensions, the trade wars, and all of that, right? So there's no way of running away from that. And I am absolutely sure that the different task forces, in the work that they do, will look at and think through how to navigate these issues. But I think it will also be important for, we hope, the governments, when they meet, will also really make a strong call for these issues to be addressed, because this is devastating to the global economy. I think we accept that. We also accept that there is not much that businesses can do in addressing these issues. Of course, we all in our countries, all G20 countries, need to work to the extent they can. The relationship is right with their governments to look at how we all respond to this, but governments would have to take the lead in some of this. Now, let me come back to your first question, which is our role as BUSA. So we started getting involved in these matters of the B20 quite a while ago. As BUSA specifically, our CEO, previous CEO, Khulekani, who is currently the Sherpa of the B20, started getting involved as far back as the presidency of Indonesia. So there was Indonesia some 3 years ago. 2 years ago, the presidency of the G20 was in India. And then last year it was Brazil, and this year it is South Africa. So knowing that it is coming to South Africa, started getting involved as far back as Indonesia to learn how these things work, so that by the time we get to host, we have some experience. We did intensify our participation during the Brazil presidency, because we were now part of this troika. The troika is the 3 countries essentially. It's the past president, current president, and the future president. So we were the incoming presidency, and we started participating quite intensively last year in Brazil. All of this enabled us to learn a lot about, firstly, how this has been done before, so that we can start to plan. So from last year, been going in and out of Brazil, learning, and we received a lot of information from Brazil that's helped us to plan our chairship of the B20 until now. You know, John, I think something to mention also is that other organizations in South Africa, businesses, etc., have been participating in B20s, previously. So we've also tried to draw on that experience. So, for instance, we have in our ranks and work with the BLSA as part of the host, so that we can bring closer those organizations and business leaders who have participated in previous B20. What has happened so far is we launched at the beginning of the year, and as I've described it, it was a very successful launch. We've also gone around the world to promote the B20, so that business organizations and businesses from different parts of the world can continue to participate. So we were in Davos, for instance, promote the B20 alongside the government. We had a team out in Washington during the spring meetings of the IMF, World Bank. Next week, we will have a team out in Abidjan to again at the CEO forum and the various other places where we've been to promote our B20, so that we make sure that there is participation from all countries, because we can't call it the B20 and all you do is you just look at South Africa. This is the body that should come up with policies and recommendations that really are supported by countries in the various, businesses in the various B20 countries. So we've done that. And as I've said, we're now at a point where work is going on in these various task forces. Unlike the government has most of its meetings physically in person. So people physically fly into the country whenever there is a meeting, and we've seen a lot of that activity, finance ministers meeting, and central bank governors meeting, etc. And that's great for our tourism, but from a B20 point of view, most of our meetings are virtual. So they take place in platforms such as the one we are interacting on, but there will be a couple of physical meetings, those that coincide with some of the government events, etc. And of course, the terminal event being our summit towards the end of the year will be physical. So we are very pleased with what we've seen. I should just say that we're also really, really humbled by the support from the South African business community that has provided a massive support. We now set up a secretariat made up of, and the numbers are growing, I think we're now up to 14 or 15 people, led by our previous CEO, Khulekani as Sherpa. With all of these 15, 16 people that we have been seconded by various businesses. They're not getting paid by BUSA. They've been seconded by various businesses to come and work with us. businesses have provided sponsorship that finances the various events and activities of the B20. So the business community has come to the party in a really, really big way, and we are very, very grateful to them for that.
Yeah, thank you, Khulekani. We are nearing the end of the podcast. I'd like to ask you three questions as we close. The one is progress. Are you pleased with the progress from the start? If we use the February launch in Cape Town as the baseline up until where we are now. The second question is, if I'm not a member of any of the task forces, is the door still open for me to participate, to nominate myself, avail myself to participate in any of the work streams? And then, of course, I'd like you to close with a call to action. What should South African businesses be doing to make this event a success? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, John. So let me start with the first question, and these are excellent questions. So what we've done is we've got a team, as part of the team that we put together in the Secretariat. It is really tracking progress very, very closely. So part of what we're doing, just to make sure that we don't slip up, is to compare where we are today relative to where, for instance, Brazil, as the most recent host, was at this time, right? And on that metric alone, we're doing very well. In some instances, we are on par with where Brazil was at this point, or even ahead of where Brazil was at this point. That gives us a sense of comfort that we're making good progress. And as I've said, some of these task forces have met 2 times in the next week. In fact, many of them will be going for their third meetings. In between the meetings, there's a lot of drafting of these recommendations and refining of them as people give input and processing the inputs that come from the meeting. So we're very pleased with the progress that has been made thus far. And John, just in terms of the call to action, to business and other communities. Perhaps before I get to that, you asked a question about is the door closed? Yes and no. For South Africa, it's by and large closed because we have reached the numbers that we, for each task force in South Africa. There may be opportunities, 1 or 2 for other countries where there isn't sufficient participation, where we could still admit them. But actually, the good thing is that there's going to be a lot of activity of interacting with the South African business community, what we refer to as side events, testing of these proposals, or bouncing of these ideas that are coming out of the task forces. So there are opportunities of interacting and still participating. I have also said that there are other engagement fora that exist alongside the B20. We participate in those. We provide briefing to those so that we can get feedback from as many people as possible. So there will be ample opportunities to participate, even if you're not in a task force necessarily at this point. Which leads me to the next question, which is that, so what is the call to action? I would say that when you see an advertisement of an event, if it has the 20, whether it says G20, try and find out whether you can participate in that, because there are some of the government events where they are open to the participation of people from other sectors. We as business have been invited to some of those. So when you see something that is a 20, just take an interest and see whether you can go there and put your views forward as a business, as a small business organization, etc. Some of these, as I've said, T20, U20, I mean, the urban 20 is particularly important because This is where small businesses are, right? In the cities and towns of this country. And these cities and towns put up bylaws that are really detrimental to small businesses. So let's go there. When we see these meetings, and just 3 weeks ago, I moderated a panel of the U20 where we had participation of people from about 42 cities around the G20 countries. And again, a huge exchange of information and views, etc. So you see something with the 20, if they are inviting you to participate, click and participate. I think these are all various opportunities for making our voices heard as businesses and as citizens in the country. This is the year in which we're given an opportunity to lead, and let us lead and participate and show that we are indeed a country that has a big ambition, but a country that is willing to work hard to grow, to really improve the lot of everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Khulekani. The final question is, come November, December, what would you like to have achieved? Or in other words, what's the definition of success? If we are in November and we have this conversation, except for being tired for running this marathon, which is your 11th marathon to run, how would we measure a successful B20? Is it acceptance of the recommendations to governments, participation levels? Yeah.
So I think there are multiple measures of success, John. The first is just the level of participation from all the G20 countries or businesses, right? Because I think the worst thing would be for us to just sit alone here in the southern tip of the African continent and put together, in the name of the business, put together a set of recommendations that nobody is really interested in. So the participation of businesses from across the G20 countries would be one measure of success. The second one, of course, would be the product that comes out of that, the policies that are policy recommendations that are put together by that group, quality, and so on. And thirdly, you are right. I mean, at the end of the day, we will take these and recommend them to the G20, to the governments. In our case, to the presidency of the G20. But those countries, other countries, the other 19 countries, will do so and promote these recommendations with their government, so that when governments meet at the end of the year, hopefully they can support some of what we are saying. So getting some of the recommendations from business accepted and forming part of the document, the communique, to use this sort of diplomatic speak, but basically the document that will be produced and agreed to by the G20 leaders would be another measure of success. The other, of course, would not be something that we will see now, because it's one thing to get a document produced, it's one thing to get everybody being excited about these, but the extent to which they are actually implemented in the various countries, etc., would be a measure of success. Usually, that works better if your recommendations are so durable that the next hosts of the G20, B20 think that those recommendations are important and they take them forward and they champion them. Because if it is championed for more and more for several presidencies, the likelihood of it finding expression is much higher. If we come up with something that only excites us and excites people just for during our presidency and it gets forgotten at the end of the year, that won't be much of a success. And so these are all of the things we're looking at and interacting with the global community to make sure that there is that kind of interest. But more importantly, remember, John, we are handing over to the United States. Yes. And so our interactions with the business community in the US, who are going to take over this responsibility, and make sure that they continue to champion these ideas when they are holding the baton is going to be critical. And we're doing that. And so far, the relationship with American businesses is great. They're participating, it's excellent. And so we're hopeful that our presidency and our chairship of the B20 will be a success because we have all of these things in place.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Khulekani. Thank you for making the time for us. And the podcast will be available on all our social media platforms. And I hope BUSA will curate it as well. This is the first of many conversations we're going to have ahead of the B20 and the penultimate meetings towards the end of the year. Thank you for joining us. Have a good day.